as two-way as possible. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And again, in the conversation pane on the right is where we're going to start today. And if you, assuming no one has shared any issues, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, Joy. Again, I will tell you about Joy Hudson and myself, but as you see in that conversation pane, you have the link to register for this capacity building series, which is open. It's on OCRA's website. We want to encourage you to sign up for everything, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. Good afternoon, Charles. Thank you, and hello. So this regional collaboration, the preview of OCRA's upcoming community capacity building series, we have a whole range of people. We've looked at the folks who have registered for today's session, and just a whole range of government, non-government, social services, private sector partners. And so we're just really excited about the diversity. Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Okay, we're going to go ahead and repost those slides once more, just to be sure that everyone is able to actually see them. We'll also be sending out OCRA will be posting the slides on its website along with the audio for this after the session, so that anyone who maybe didn't get to participate, certainly if you're looking to go back and review those, you are able to do that at a future time. So the slides are posting now. You can just scroll down to the bottom of your screen for anyone who has not used this particular webinar with us in the past. And what will pop up on the bottom is a toolbar that has slides on it, basically, along with some other things. If you click on those slides, maybe in orange on your screen, you should be able to see the regional collaboration slide that I have posted. More housekeeping for you today. Want to encourage you, Joy's muting everyone as you come on, again, to use the conversation pane, and that registration. And that registration link will remain in there so that you can go off and do that maybe after this session. And then also, there will be a survey that's posted in this conversation pane that you'll post at the end to allow you to give us some feedback. And again, as I said, these slides will be posted on OCRA's website after the session. So let's go ahead and get started. You will be able to drive through these slides on your own. You can hit your down arrow. You can also use the tool on the slide itself. You can see at the bottom it gives you a 1/25. That means we're going through 25 slides today. On slide 2, and I will periodically tell you on what slide I'm on. A lot of people like to drive through their own slides, so we like to let you do that. Joy Hudson and myself are your hosts for today. Joy is there working in the background. You'll hear from me the whole session, but she's also communicating in that conversation pane in case there's any difficulties or anything that we need to help you work through. So we are HPG Network, and HPG Network, High Performance Government Network. We are feel really blessed to be communicating with you today. We are partnered with Indiana Office of Community and Rural Affairs, and this session, as its name tells you, is brought to you by OCRA, and we are basically bringing this out, and its schedule is aligned so that anyone who's looking to submit a letter of intent, any group with OCRA's Stellar program in 2019, you can do that through these sessions, but just so you know, that is not a specific requirement. In fact, it's not even expected that you would submit for Stellar under this. It's really under this idea that OCRA, as it says on its website, has changed the Stellar Communities program. So from its website, given the increased competitiveness with economic development, a regionalism trend has evolved as a popular strategy across the U.S. Indiana is joining the cutting edge and incorporating regionalism into our most successful program, the Stellar Communities program. Beginning in January 2018, the program evolved to a regional partnership design. A minimum of 2 or more communities are encouraged to partner to create a self-sufficient region. And so you'll see through this set of slides when we say region, in quote, for that reason. So population population divisions are no longer a program component. So that big change in this philosophy, this approach, really comes with the acknowledgement that the world's changing, right? And so we're more connected than ever. We have access to more information. We're no longer confined to a workspace that's inside a building. We can work from our homes. And so that's led to this whole different approach to things. And so we at HPG Network, again, feel really honored to be hosting this series. And as you'll find out as we go forward, we will be talking about this workshop series that's really designed to help facilitate creating these teams. So I don't know if anybody reads City Lab and some of these different articles, but we see this on rural and urban contexts more recently, but you're going to see there's lots of applications for regionalism, and I want to encourage you that in these workshops, should you choose to get involved with them, will give us the opportunity to talk about the different ways this is happening. And the way that this is designed is not just to give you tools and concepts, but really to give you opportunities to talk with people who have done it, are doing it, love doing it. We want to just be the facilitators of that. HPG Network, we're into cultivating thriving communities, and Joy and I are going to be a part of that. You'll also probably meet Brian along the way, president of HPG Network. So let's talk about today's session objectives on slide 3. So what we're trying to do here is to give you a set of expectations on this community capacity building series, to give you some insights into what it's all about and what we hope to accomplish through it with you as our partner. Also to help you to understand how to create a team to complete future sessions on behalf of your region, so to speak. And so we'll talk more about that. So those are the things that we want to try to accomplish today. So just an overarching picture of this is, the approach that we're taking is not to assume the position that, a broad perspective like a region and taking a regional approach, we have to come to some kind of top-down regional government, but rather this idea that through incremental development of social capital and institutions, ad hoc partnerships, and then those frameworks that governments do set up, like incentives and other strategic alignments, physical levels of government. So if you are a leader in your community, and that's what we see signing up for these sessions, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a governmental entity to lead this regional quote-unquote discussion with the community. So we'll look at some of the intended outcomes that we have for the session. So actually, just one more thing on our session objectives. We want to make sure that when we're looking at what you can expect from this, we're talking about the things that OCRA is looking at from the seller communities initiative in general. So looking at fostering regional collaborative behaviors and investments, to stem the tide of non-metropolitan population loss through talent attraction and retention. So these economic development kind of concepts, building sustainability, building capacity in municipal governance, and leveraging quality of places through comprehensive and transformative planning processes, building on those current assets. So as you can see, there's this range of actors that need to be involved in this kind of a movement, from local and regional, state, federal geographies, but also public and private sectors that come together and sort of harmonize under it. So we want to, you'll hear me say quite a bit, and I definitely love to hear from you. Any questions you have as we go forward, what would these teams need to look like? So let's look at the intended outcomes of the series itself. What we want to do is bring you tools and case studies. Just one moment. Hi, Lori. Does anyone else have an audio problem? Okay. Lori, if you are dialing in, we'll let Joy help you out here, but you should be able to either dial in. She can't hear me. I'll let Joy pick that up in the conversation pane. So tools and case studies. When we think about tools and case studies, we're talking about increased regional collaboration and sharing. So skill building tools, those pieces that we'll be bringing in. We'll talk more about this when I tell you about our format. But when we think of case studies, these are actual communities that have undertaken these kinds of initiatives. So the idea is to bring together people like yourselves who are doing, love doing, have done this before, to have conversations, really helpful conversations about how to do this. And so as we look at tools and case studies, there will be some skill building tools, and then there will also be, we'll be sharing with one another as much as anything. It is not necessarily just a training session. So this is facilitated workshops. Also, under the collaboration category, we want to encourage leaders from multiple sectors and multiple geographies who want to work together to come together to make that happen. And so as we do that, the idea is that you want to work together first and foremost. And then secondly, that as we come together, that HPG Network, we're there to help facilitate those relationships. So you don't necessarily have to develop everything coming into this. In fact, a perfect place if you've had an idea or you want to start down that direction to use this there. But it's also a great place that if you've already started working together, for you to join up in these sessions where you'll be regularly working on things together to forward that, to further your purpose. And then finally, the shared vision. We're really future focused here. So successful long-term collaboration is what we want to see. And that really relies on creating a common vision and working toward that end. So all of your arrows sort of line up and head in the same direction. So looking at those intended outcomes, that's what we're looking to do through these sessions. And so we're going to dig a little more deeply, slide by slide, into what that means. So the next slide, on slide 5, you'll see is globally, plan regionally, act locally. We've heard this before. Many of you may live it every day. But we know that from a planning perspective, regional planning is essentially collaborating to plan for common issues within this common geography. And they could be ecological or political or economic issues that we're looking at. But jurisdictional boundaries like county lines and city limits, definition of a region, but they don't necessarily correspond with how we understand the issues that we're dealing with when they're regional issues. And we'll talk about some of the regional issues that people may be seeing in their communities. So we encourage you to kind of think beyond what we've traditionally come to know as regions when you're considering coming into this program. So let's look at why are we focusing on quote-unquote regions? Well, I just talked about regional planning. Well, that's nothing new. Regional planning isn't the thing that's really new. But as I talked about earlier, as our landscape continues to evolve and the needs of communities evolve, regional planning really gives us the opportunity to improve not only the built environment and infrastructure that's necessary to support it, but there's also this whole other range of things such as health and social and economic well-being. So looking at all different facets of that from a regional perspective can be really a really good approach. So some of the governance structures, on the other hand, that we've known of, special purpose authorities that are focused on a certain geography or certain issues like regional airports or water or transit authorities, or even metropolitan planning organizations and councils of government. I know we've got some of those on the session today. Those are all designed with regions in mind. And so as you'll see, we're going to talk about the different team members you're going to want to have. Having regional entities can be a very effective tool. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to lead the team, but having them on the team can be very helpful. So there may be civic collaborations that work with or sometimes include governmental partners, or they may work outside of government and serve to kind of give a voice to public policies and investments and that kind of things. But whatever the case, working at the regional level requires a lot of coordination among local and state and federal governments, but also among all of those partners to make that happen. And so I really feel like this is demonstrated in the number and the diversity of the entities that are on this call today. So as you'll see in future sessions, this approach is focused on open access and collaboration rather than this older model of, government structure and closed or limited access or and coordination. So really it's much more broad than what we may have known before. So just a little bit more background. So what are some of the influences that are driving this idea behind regionalism? I've said it before, but we're more connected than ever, thanks to the internet and different technologies that were developed in the mid-90s. But that's opened up and expanded and created this interconnectedness of our global markets. And so looking at that from our employers' perspective, for instance, business startups, and even looking at, our internet connectivity and those issues throughout the state. Those are all things that global markets tend to influence and drive some of those as maybe more urgent issues than they used to be. Also, the global workforce is another angle on that. The idea that people can work from home nowadays and be able to access jobs in other places from their homes. But that internet connectivity becomes a big issue, and I'm sure you could name plenty of other things that impact that. So when we look at those kinds of global challenges in terms of how accessible our global markets are, or how accessible our workforce is to companies in other countries and even throughout the country that want to hire them, our quality of life is really great in Indiana, and we have great places to live. They're very affordable. Making sure that people have access to jobs is bigger than it used to be. It's not just in one geography necessarily. Also, this idea of fluid geographic boundaries, and kind of been talking about that, but we've got this mobile lifestyle nowadays, and people who cross state and local jurisdictional boundaries on a routine basis to go to work in their daily commutes, to get access to healthcare services or go grocery shopping. Those all, that plays a role in this idea of regionalism. Also, natural flows. Now, this is just natural resources. When we think about air and land and water, if we have runoff from one area, it doesn't just stop at our jurisdictional boundaries. It flows beyond there. And so you see particularly governments planning air, land, and water issues. And so looking at them from a regional perspective can oftentimes open up new opportunities. And then finally, government cutbacks and shortfalls, which is something I think we're all familiar with. But those changes looking at things from a regional perspective really gives us the opportunity to look at cost savings and program efficiencies and economies of scale and of scope on certain things we may not have been able to do when we weren't looking at things from a more regional perspective. So those are just some of the issues that are sort of surrounding this idea of regionalism. And again, as you're thinking about putting together a team to go through this workshop series, there's some tools that regions can use for promoting themselves and things and benefits to doing that. And so on slide 8, you'll see visioning for the region, for instance, having a grander vision than just one particular geography or one particular issue, but looking at those issues from a regional perspective can be an amazing tool to help the rising tide lift all the boats. Also, setting regional benchmarks and indicators can be, in some cases, if we're measuring ourselves from a local perspective or a programmatic perspective, but really not looking at all of the influences. And like I say, we'll talk about some of those things that, but one example, we spend a lot of time in housing at HPG Network. When we look at housing and we look at from a regional perspective, you see that there are opportunities to see that it's one community's decision or their set of policies directly impacts that of another area, and vice versa. Leadership development from a regional perspective, you can share resources even, and really help to develop the advocates and the champions for regional issues. Formation of formal and informal networks is another tool for promoting a region where you have, social and professional interaction, knowledge sharing, trust building, strategy implementation. You're all dealing with similar issues in that particular area or whatever you define your region as. And so using that as a way to share and grow together. Also, collaboration and conflict resolution, so that you can address maybe interjurisdictional type disputes, whether that's on a government level or it could be programmatic level. Maybe you have a couple of agencies that are serving a particular geography, and you need to be more coordinated in your approach. And then finally, regional capacity. This foster that regional dialogue and mobilize your financial and human resources to benchmark your capacity as a region, just in general, from a capacity standpoint. So lots of tools out there for promoting your region. Looking at the benefits of a regional approach on slide 9, we have really 4 different things that we, and maybe 5, you might see it as 5, but the benefits: more efficient and effective use of your resources. So when you've got increased coordination and communication, you're going to have more efficient use of your resources. Also, the ability to pool and leverage limited resources to make sure that the broad region is appropriately served. A third thing, synergistic effect that really enhances the broad region. So, looking at how synergy plays a role when we've got, multiple communities or multiple areas coming together to think about those regional problems and what each brings to the table, how that grows. It also allows stakeholders to address issues that were maybe once put at odds with each other. I mentioned earlier urban and rural communities coming together to understand one another in Kentucky, as an example I recently saw. And looking at those communities, maybe in the past we've looked at rural and urban areas as being separate and distinct, but when we look at them from a regional perspective, all of a sudden maybe we've got our problems aren't as similar as what we thought, and that's what Kentucky's starting to see. Strength in numbers. Larger groups are more effective at voicing issues of collective concern than smaller local divisions of them. And so, maximizing our influence over key issues that we've defined as being a priority can be really effective. So let's move on to slide 10. So what are some of the outcomes of effective regional approaches? And these are some of the outcomes that we're going to be looking for through this workshop series as well. So common vision, which kind of sets the stage for everyone to win. The enhanced ability to pool and leverage limited marketing resources. The increased engagement of the business community, as we've talked about from the beginning. The idea here is really looking at economic development. The ability to attract more funding, streamlined services and improved customer service, coordinated resources among communities in the business community. Now, we've seen different collaborations, even HPG Network, and working with groups of permitting, a permitting coalition that's looking at a multi-jurisdictional approach to looking at permitting and how that's impacting that particular group. Looking at the regional approach to addressing your issues in whatever your region is that you define it can be very, very effective. So that's kind of the picture of regionalism, if we want to put it that way. I don't know whether you consider yourselves regionalists, but the idea is we work in a regional economy and a global economy, and this the series and our set of workshops are really designed to facilitate great conversations and whatever comes out of that, from the perspective of helping your region, however you define that, to be better. So let's talk more specifics about the series. But before I do that, I want to offer that in the conversation pane, if you have any questions or comments you want to make, I want to invite them there, and to the extent that we can talk about them during the session, we will. So looking at the series itself and the way that it's constructed, starts on slide 12. So the format here is going to be less about teaching and training, as maybe have been done in other sessions that you might have participated in the past. In this case, our presentation will be more like workshops that are designed to engage participants in intensive discussion about activities that are focused on the specific subject. So when you bring your particular issue to the table, whatever that regional issue is, and your team that's going to work on that, that's what we're there is to facilitate that intensive conversation and work activities. We like tabletop teams and a lot of group talking, group conversation. And then there are going to be post assignments, and we'll talk a little bit about each of these later on, but post assignments that are designed to promote more independent work and help you to progress toward whatever specific goals you are establishing. And then we'll also be wrapping that with technical assistance that you may need with the work that you're doing. So looking at it from the standpoint of this workshop with some post assignments that'll help you keep progressing, conversations during the workshops about what progress you may have made since last time, questions you may have, comments you want to make, that's the format. And it's, like I say, very interactive. And so looking at those pieces individually and then collectively, the idea is that we bring them all together to give you the support that you need through HPG Network. And we're really excited to be able to provide that for you. So when we look at, for instance, the technical assistance side of things, which again will be follow-up, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, in addition to facilitating those discussions in the workshop, we might bring some information that we want to share, expertise that we can provide, instruction, skills training, but basically using those workshops to really help us to build one upon the next to give you what you need. So when we look at things, when you couple this approach with this regional ecosystem that we've been talking about, and we use that to kind of frame the full range of regional issues, whether that's urban or rural, large or small issues, or programmatic issues that you may be bringing to the table. The idea is that we'll be able to have a more complete analysis of those issues, and that leads to a heightened ability on your part to develop the workable strategies you need to address them. And so, the types of things that we see typically in taking a regionalist approach, things that fall under that, it could be anything from some of the traditional things like water resource planning. It may be more on the technical side, regional approaches to water issues as a resource, regional land resource planning, or regional economic development planning, regional housing planning, as I said, has come up quite a bit, regional planning for public health. There's all kinds of different issues that get approached, but the idea is that you'll ultimately choose the issue that you want to focus on, and then build your team and work with that team to address that and to discuss it. And so then we'll be bringing back to the table ways to help you tackle those complex issues that need to be addressed with multiple independent entities, tools and techniques that others have used effectively to address those complex issues, and then how that regional ecosystem is a more viable backdrop for getting that more complete an accurate picture of the issues to give you those workable solutions. So it's pretty circle of life, symbiotic in nature. And so that really leads me to the series topics that we want to cover on slide 13. So as you see there, these are very high-level topics that we'll be digging into with you, but everything from vision, leadership, and strategy to team building, internal and external communication, the execution and implementation, and then we'll talk with stellar designees about what they've done, and then also some next steps. So vision, leadership, and strategy. In this session, we might, and this is slide 14, we might talk about things like establishing an identity for your quote-unquote region, establishing various structures for how you work together, collaboration frameworks, if you will, that will help you to create and implement your goals and strategies that are especially focused on regional innovation, entrepreneurship development, knowledge sharing, and program efficiencies, those kinds of things. Transforming a region for economic, community, or social progress, or all three. And then building from distinguishing features that you have in your natural boundaries within that region. So different types of things that we talk about. Also from the team building angle on slide 15, it's the nature of the beast that when we have jurisdictional boundaries at work within a region, that when we start to collaborate, we still need to understand that there's this idea of what they call co-opetition. But the idea is how do we work in that framework, knowing that there are multiple entities that may have competing interests at work. And so the tools, the resources, and support that you as regional leaders who are working to build bridges across different sectors, maybe different jurisdictions, to help to unify that region. Also, co-opetition, as I mentioned, just looking at it from that perspective and understanding that you're still going to have some of that, and how do you work within that framework? Dispute resolution techniques and processes to resolve conflict in a professional and a timely manner. And then also establishing regional support network as a key resource for your team. So looking at team building from a lot of different perspectives. And on slide 16, just digging a little more deeply into some of these topics that we'll be discussing. Internal and external communication, well, that's all about, looking at our informal and formal networks, social and professional interactions, knowledge sharing, trust building, strategy implementation. So all of these factors that go into actually the implementation, knowing that internal and external communication is going to be key in having a flawless delivery. And then execution, beyond internal and external communication, we have execution and implementation. So looking at how do we foster a regional dialogue? What is it that we need to do in order to bring attention to these issues that we've identified? Mobilizing financial and human resources, what's available, and how do we bring that together? Again, how do we grow the pie just by bringing together more team members who care about these issues? And then benchmarking performance. So what do we consider to be collectively to be the goal? And how do we know when we've gotten there, but certainly how do we know when we're headed in that direction and we're actually getting progress towards what we're trying to achieve? So those will be some of the things that we'll talk about. But as I said, a lot of these workshops are designed for you. And so what we want to know is, how can we help to facilitate your team into growing and becoming what it is that you see and you envision for it to be. On slide 18 is our stellar best practices and next steps, and we're really excited about this because you'll hear from other stellar communities, but also we'll be talking about, well, where do we go from here? And so each of those sessions are laid out in a way that it's progressive to help you to walk through each of those particular stages of team development and getting into looking at these issues on a regional basis. So that really wraps up what the structure is going to look like. And so on slide 19, we'll see that we have our schedule laid out. Now, like I said, each of these are individual sessions, but as you'll see in just a moment, these are aligned on a timeline that if a team wants to submit for the next letter of intent deadline, you will be able to do that using this schedule, which is really nice. But we're incorporating all of these case studies and previous stellar winners and infusing that so that you really get a full picture of some of the things that are happening that are really best practices. So you see there, we'll have vision and leadership and strategy starting in September, and we'll have a north location and a south location, which remains the same. Whether it's, if it's north, it'll be at the Peru Public Library, and if it's in the south, it'll be at the Bedford Public Library. And as you can see, the time is 1 to 3 p.m. For each of these sessions. And so you'll have the slide, but you also, again, the registration link was in at the beginning of our conversation, and we encourage you to go out there and sign up for these. Now let's talk a little bit about how we want you to process this. So in between, as I said earlier, in between each of those sessions is going to be a post assignment. And that's the idea there is we want to promote progress on achieving the objectives that you set. So we will offer one-on-one technical assistance through phone and email in between the sessions to help your team. And then we're also going to have that webinar that you saw on the previous slide, on slide 19, which will be on December 5th. That's going to be kind of an opportunity to review the common questions and issues that have come up from our participants. We'll do that as a webinar. Beyond that, what you want to look at is then how would you engage in this if you're interested? And so that's on slide 21. How can my region get involved? Again, region in quotes. You want to register teams of up to maybe 8 people per region. And those teams would then commit to attending the entire series. And then what we'd like to see is at least 80% of the team attend each session. So we're not saying everyone has to make every single one, but 80% of the team should attend each session. It's important because as we're working through these issues, those workshops will be opportunities for you to address key issues as you then leave and go back home to work on your post assignments, which again we'll be there to help you with. This approach, the way that we've structured this, is designed for you to get a lot done in those sessions when you're all together. On slide 22, we also have some recommendations on people we think or positions maybe that you want to consider including on your team that'll make it really, these are important inclusions for your team. So mayors, council members, planning directors, as you see there, communication staff can be very helpful, chamber leaders, tourism bureau leaders, regional planning organizations, councils of government, and then partners. So what you want to do when you're constructing that team, and that's up to 8 people per region, you want to look at, those different roles and positions you would want to have in order to have a smoother implementation. So I guess at that point, I'd like to kind of take a moment and ask, are there any questions for the conversation pane? David, thank you. Why only north and south and not in quadrants? The idea, I think, in setting a north and a south location was so that we would be able to not necessarily define what a region is, but I think that's a good question in terms of you're asking, could we go into the 4 corners of the state? As we take this out, it'll be really important that we're accessible. And I think that the thought in each of those locations was that we would be able to get to people from the northern part of the state and the southern. But we will certainly take that back to OCRA as I guess if that's a suggestion, we could take it as a suggestion. Thank you, Joy, for posting out our Survey Monkey survey. So every one of our sessions, we're going to ask you for feedback. And so we want to make sure that, one, we're capturing your feedback on this session, but also we're asking you in that survey to let us know if you're considering coming with a region or joining a team that for a region that you're putting together. And again, I want to suggest that as you consider that, if you don't already have your region in mind or your team in mind, that you look at those suggested people that you should consider including on slide 22 and consider those and make sure that your team is as complete as possible given what you're trying to accomplish. On slide 23, again, we've posted in the conversation pane the opportunity to do that. If you already know who that is and you're already looking for but if you go out to that link to OCRA's website to sign up for this, on slide 24 you'll see just kind of a snapshot of just the website itself. Thank you, Joyce. You just reposted it there for everyone. If you want to go out and sign up So we've got two links in the conversation pane. One is your survey, and that's the SurveyMonkey link. The other is the the other is the link to OCRA's workshop webpage, and that was the second one Joy just posted in the conversation pane. You'll just go to the website. What's important here is you'll see each of the sessions. So click there to register and sign up for it. So thank you, Jennifer. Hi. How do participants follow up with OCRA? So I guess, can you give me a little bit more on that one? So OCRA, just if I'm understanding what you're saying, and go ahead and give me more if I'm not understanding your question. So participants will basically sign up and register to be a part of the workshop series. We will host them. Oh, they can contact their community liaison. Okay. Thank you, Michael. Okay. Yeah. We see in the conversation pane, Michael from OCRA has just confirmed that you'll contact Michael or your region's community liaison. So the idea is that you'll go and you'll register online. We'll host the workshops, and Michael will actually be in our workshops with us, and HPG Network will be your technical assistance providers through all of those sessions. So what's exciting is, again, whether you're going to submit a letter of intent or not, this can be a good way to get things started and looking at things from a regional perspective. Is it okay, hi Jenny, is it okay for current 2018 finalists to register? I think that's okay, but I don't think it's expected, Jenny. And then thank you, Jennifer, for posting that map. Okay. So I'm so grateful to have all this conversation going on in the conversation pane. That's exactly what it's built for. What other questions do you have of us as we're looking at this? We really want to see as much participation as possible and to see regions, however they're defined, coming together to look differently at things, to look at things from a more comprehensive perspective, a broader perspective. So we want to make sure we're answering all of your questions. Okay, seeing no questions in the conversation pane, you'll have another opportunity in the survey for anyone who doesn't want to post it out for others to see, or if something comes up as you're completing that. So if you look at, if you go out to that SurveyMonkey survey, please make sure that you complete that and let us know if you're thinking about signing up. We definitely would love to see you participate. So with that, I want to thank everyone for your time. It looks like we're wrapping up early with so few questions, and wish you a great day. Again, I'm Heather Allen, and Joy Hudson and I from HPG Network, we're happy to have had you on the session today. Thanks to OCRA for this awesome series. We look forward to seeing you in our session.